Today I am going to discuss about eyeball dissection. Eyeball is a globe of eye. It is organ of sight and it resembles like a camera. It occupies the orbital cavity and each orbit, two eyeballs are present. In each eyeball, there are three concentric coats are present, and there are number one, it is a fibrous coat, number two, vascular coat, number three, it is a nervous coat. So here we'll see all these coats, the layers, the parts of the eyeball in this dissection. So here I am showing this is that eyeball. There the outer layer, there are two parts like sclera. This is the white of the eye. This is total, it is the sclera, and cornea. So cornea occupies the anterior 1/6 part of the fibrous coat, whereas sclera occupies the posterior 5/6 portion of the coat. And this sclera, it is very dense, tough. It protects the internal ocular contents. And here in the posterior part of sclera, we can see this is that optic nerve which is emerging out, and this sclera protects the internal portions, and also it gives origin of the ocular muscles like superior rectus, medial rectus, lateral rectus, inferior rectus, obliquus muscles. So all these muscles are attached to sclera. And whereas here the cornea, it is very transparent, thin, avascular layer, and this avascular layer nourish from capillaries present in that sclerocorneal junction, that is known as the limbus, from aqueous humor, lacrimal fluid. So from these it nourishment will be take place. And we'll see, to see that internal structures, I'm going to give insertion at the limbus portion, that is the sclerocorneal junction. Then we can see the internal layers, that is the middle coat, that is the uveal tract we call. And so that layer, the liquid which is coming out while giving insertion is the aqueous humor. So aqueous humor is at very transparent fluid. It occupies the aqueous chamber, that is the anterior segment of the eyeball. So to see that the internal layers, once we open the eyeball, so it appears like this. So that in middle layer we call it is the uveal tract or vascular layer. So these are the layers from external to internal. This is iris, ciliary body, and choroid. So here this is the posterior chamber of the eyeball. So where we can see this is the lens. Anterior to the lens is the anterior segment. Posterior to the lens is the posterior segment. Anterior segment is occupied by the aqueous humor. Posterior segment occupied by a jelly-like structure, we call here it is a vitreous humor. So once we see, remove that vitreous humor, so we can see the posterior segment here. So lens is a biconvex, very transparent part, and here internally we can see that brownish layer. This brown pigment layer is known as the choroid. Choroid occupies the posterior portion, and because of presence of pigment cells, the appears the brown color, and this anterior to this choroid here, this anterior segment will have the ciliary body and iris. Anterior most part is the iris, and we can see anteriorly this is the cornea, and this gap is known as the pupil. Pupil adjust the light rays, like when in the dark light this is contracts, in the dim light it dilates, like with the muscles, iris muscles. And this after the iris it is a ciliary body. The ciliary body also is a dark color, presence of melanin pigment, and ciliary body is responsible for production of the aqueous humor. And there is a refractive media, means there is a cornea, and there is a anterior chamber, there's a posterior chamber, lens, then there is a vitreous body. So the light rays enters from cornea and reaches up to here internal layer. That internal layer we call it is the nervous layer, retina. Retina continues with that anteriorly ora serrata and here up to the optic disc. So optic disc, this is a spot we known as the optic disc, and from here can see that optic now emerge at that outside. And this optic disc, there we can see that all the pigment layers of the retina terminates here, and we call here it is a physiological blind spot. So this layer, this is with the choroid and retina both together, and this is the layer, this is the sclera. So sclera from outside to inner side, sclera, choroid and retina. There, whereas anteriorly you can see that cornea and the pupil and the iris and ciliary body. So these are the structures of the eyeball.